Okay, welcome to a special edition of the LFC Delaware Podcast. Today we're delighted to have Simon Hughes join us, author of, amongst other books, Allez, 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 and There She Goes, which we'll be talking about today. We're going to do all of our public service announcements and the rest in the next scheduled podcast later this weekend. It's May 29th today, which happens to be the anniversary, I think, of the Heysel disaster. Well, I don't know why that came into my head as a starting point. We're going to be exploring with Simon some of his work and hopefully getting some real big insights as to what's going on with the Premier League season and maybe for Sean's benefit, some info on transfers. So welcome, Simon.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
So with that, we usually start with people to go back to their first experiences of supporting Liverpool, following Liverpool. Can you take us back there, and we'll move on?
Well, I mean, I can't remember 1990. I mean, I was born in 1983. For some reason, I can remember certain games in 1989 and 1990, but the early part, all the parts of 1990, but not the day they actually clinched the title. So my sort of entry point to Liverpool was in the early part of the 1990s in terms of match going, and it was a pretty depressed period, you know, for Liverpool under Graham Souness. I mean, I'd sort of grown up watching all the videos of Liverpool in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and I remember my dad just put me in front of the TV and watching a documentary about Bill Shankly, and both of my grandparents have passed away, or grandfathers have passed away, so he sort of became almost a replacement, you know, grandfather in many ways. Like, I just remember listening to this guy and just transfixed by his passion and his love of football, and that's where it really started, I guess, sort of the early 90s. And I remember speaking to my dad when they appointed Graham Souness, because my dad was a massive Souness fan, absolutely loved him as a player. You know, some Liverpool fans around his age would say that Kenny Dalglish was his hero, but for my dad, it was Graham Souness. And I remember when they appointed him from Glasgow Rangers, and my dad was like so happy about it, saying, "Oh, you know, he's the man to really take us on." And I've never listened to him about football ever since, to be honest, because you know, we sort of know how it went under Souness. I mean, it was sort of the start of the decline at Liverpool. So, I mean, I've been quite fortunate to see Liverpool, you know, win nearly everything there is to win. But certainly the entry point, it was a bad couple of years really for Liverpool. You know, it wasn't attendances were down at Anfield, and the team wasn't doing well on the pitch. It was a big period of transition, and they never really matched up to the successes of the teams that I'd watch on the videos that my dad had given me. So there was a lot of frustration there, really, and yeah, it was a strange period, really. I mean, there's quite a lot of people who, you know, a lot of lads my age will probably say the same thing, that, you know, it sort of explains why at the moment, you know, the sort of the yearning to win the title. I've always wondered what it would be like and how the city would react, and I certainly never envisaged it being under the circumstances of a global pandemic. And it feels bad to sort of talk about the frustrations around that, because I understand there's a lot of suffering in the world, but, you know, yeah, I just can't believe it sort of could end like this, really, this 30-year wait. It's just quite a strange and a very unforeseen way of a conclusion of a long period of time, which is entails all frustration. But, you know, it's been, that said, I mean, it's not been a bad period really for Liverpool. I think people talk about sort of the 30-year wait, and, you know, they've won everything else. You know, they've won the Champions League twice and been to 2 other finals. You know, they've been to 4 finals in that period, which is quite a lot really for any football club. So, you know, it hasn't been too bad, I suppose. And yeah, it's been fascinating really the last few years, particularly working, covering Liverpool and Merseyside football. You know, it's been a great period to be writing about it because of one man really, Jurgen Klopp, who's really transformed the club, in my opinion.
So you talked about Shankly. There's a lot. I've seen people draw a lot of comparisons between Shankly and Klopp. Is that something that I don't know if you've written about that, but is that
A
something?
little bit. I did. Remember after Liverpool beat Roma at 5-2 at Anfield 2 years ago. I remember I did write quite a big piece at that time. I was writing for the Independent newspaper, although it was online. And there are parallels. I mean, the sort of I think the word that I'd sort of use to compare them is the conviction that they have. What they say they truly believe in. I don't think either of them sort of said things that they didn't believe, and I think that's what makes them relatable in terms of the average person on the street or a footballer who. Footballers tend to be quite sort of paranoid people, I think, because so many people want something out of them. Like it's the demands on them are incredible, and I think that's what makes Klopp such a special character. I think because I think he's able to be honest with people. I think he's an honest person, really. And I think that's where the parallel is. And equally, people talk about sort of his I guess his socialist views. There are some parallels with Shankly, although I sort of think that Klopp is more of a liberal, really, than a socialist in many ways. I think that drum has been banged a little bit too hard, in the sense that there are certain values that he has, which you would say certainly link back to that sort of Shankly-esque value, but he's more of an open-minded liberal, I think. With a left-leaning liberal is probably the best way of putting it. So yeah, I mean, he's just a force of nature, really. I mean, I remember when he first came to the club and when he was appointed, it just felt like a weight had been lifted that day. I remember being in the press conference, and when he walked into the room, obviously the cameras were clicking, but everybody else just felt silent. He was so tall, that's the other thing. Such a tall figure, sort of, you wouldn't want to mess with him, really. Even though he's sort of obviously quite a jovial sort of character in front of the media. I've seen the other side of him when he can be quite intense and aggressive, and if he's unhappy with something, he will let you know. I think that's the thing about him. He's authentic and believable, and for me, without him, I don't think any of the stuff which is happening at Liverpool now happens necessarily. I just don't. I think the combination of him and Liverpool just works.
Awesome.
How disenchanted were you about Rodgers at the time? I'm someone who's loyal to a fault, and I thought it was a little bit odd that they fired him after the draw at Goodison.
Yeah.
But I guess in hindsight, my thought was that the reason they pulled the trigger then was so that Klopp wasn't snapped up by perhaps Chelsea or one of the other clubs that might have been about to make a change.
Well, with I think it was right to make the change, but they had to get the right person in charge. There's no point just taking a plunge into the darkness. I think you're right there. I think, it's quite clear that Liverpool had been negotiating with Klopp while Brendan Rodgers was still in charge. I mean, the timeline of events, it's definitely the case. I know that for a fact. I know football clubs get criticised when they line up managers to replace managers that are currently in work, but at the end of the day, they've got to make sure that they've got the right person in charge coming in. For me, it makes very little sense not to do it that way, really. I think people get a bit too moralistic about that issue. The managers are paid handsomely, to do their job, and up until that point, he's had more or less all the support that he wanted off the club, really. I feel with Rodgers that very talented coach who, when he came in, I know the first few weeks of training when he was that summer of 2012, a lot of the experienced players were like saying this guy does it totally differently to any of the coaches that they'd worked with. Benitez, Houllier, the main two, really. Said he's really progressive, well liked. The players at that point did like him, but I just think that ultimately, I think that job came from a bit too soon. in his managerial career. Liverpool job is like, it's one of the biggest jobs in football still. You know, it's one of the most sought after jobs, and the demands of the job particularly are quite unique because of the lack of success, you know, in terms of the league and the desire to win that league. And obviously he went very close to winning it, you know, and in incredible circumstances. I mean, if he'd have won that league, he would have deserved a lot of the criticism, a lot of the praise coming his way, because, you know, that season, I know people say about Suarez, you know, sort of was the focal point of that team, but Brendan Rodgers did help create that environment and set up the team in a certain way to get the best out of Suarez. I felt in a way that, you know, Kenny Dalglish wasn't able to as well, you know. So, yeah, I mean, but then there's almost the cut-off point in the season after, 18 months after, there's no doubt about it that was a bad time. You know, you can't deny that. You know, that Liverpool got a lot wrong in the transfer market, which didn't help Brendan. I don't think he had maybe the art of negotiation that other managers might have when they're working with other, you know, a big club. And every club is big club. It's like there are fiefdoms, different people trying to control their own influences. I don't think he was necessarily quite as skilled at doing that as maybe, you know, he perhaps thought that he was. And in the end, you know, I think it was right to make the change when they did. I mean, the form at the start of that season was poor, and it wasn't just form; it had been, you know, a prolonged period of struggle, really. And when you've got a manager like Jurgen Klopp who's available and open to coming to Liverpool, I mean, I don't know whether you're leading into this, but that summer of 2015, I spoke to Klopp's agent a lot. I wasn't the only journalist, I think, you know, who was picking up the phone trying to get a feeling for whether there was interest there. It was very clear, very, very clear that there was interest, but you know, there had to be ultimately Liverpool that had to push that agenda. So quite an interesting time, really. I mean, I think Jurgen Klopp definitely wanted a rest, but, you know, football for him, I think, is a bug that, you know, you only need so much rest before you get bored. And it was quite clear that he wanted to get back into football, but he could have gone to, you know, there were approaches from Chelsea, Manchester United before that. So Liverpool did have to work, you know, quickly and efficiently to make sure that he came to Anfield. And it's for me, it's the most important moment in the last 30 years, really, getting him as manager, because, as I said, without him, I think I know the club is improved off the pitch, and there are certain elements of the club that are stronger because of certain things that have happened that maybe haven't been inspired by Klopp, but he certainly pins it all together. You know, his man management skills, his vision, his tactical awareness, his personality, you know, his level-headedness when it matters, his passion, everything about him, for me, is, you know, it still feels fresh. That's the best thing that I can say about Jurgen Klopp, is that, you know, 5 years in, it still feels like exciting with him, doesn't it? It doesn't feel boring at all. It's not like we're seeing the same thing over and over again. It still feels like, for me, you know, watching Liverpool, it still feels really exciting all the time, you know, and still feels like there's a lot more that can happen, you know, with him in charge. So hopefully he'll stay for a lot longer.
Yeah. I think one of the quotes I liked was from Linda's, who said that if this project is a day, we haven't got to lunchtime yet, which I sincerely hope is true.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you know, I've got to be honest, I was quite surprised when he signed a new contract, you know, just before Christmas, because, you know, the indications were that, you know, that he eventually would sort of move on. But I think he's smart enough to realise the situation at Liverpool is different to the way it was at Mainz and the way it was at Dortmund. You know, Liverpool, let's have it right, are a much bigger club than Borussia Dortmund. No matter what people might try and say, you know, if you get it right at Liverpool, it means that you're not going to have your best players stolen by rival clubs. Yeah. You know, so, and he's got it right at Liverpool. So Liverpool are in a position now where, you know, they're going to keep the best players. You know, it's on Liverpool's terms, and so he can build, you know, another team on his terms, not by having, you know, clubs taking away his best players before they even reach the peak. So I think that was a big attraction for him, you know, that he was able to to not just build one team and see this team's sort of developments, which could go on for a few more years yet, but then gradually build another team in his own sort of image as well, which he hasn't really been able to do at other clubs, you know. So that's a different challenge again. I think whilst it remains fresh for him, you know, that he'll want to stay.
Thought the extension, the contract extension, and the timing of it was interesting. Right around the election over there, and I think I read something that he said, well, we needed some good news amongst all this not so good news. So here you go, guys.
Well, that's it. I mean, I think the one thing about Klopp is like he's very, very well informed about what's going on. You know, when I speak to people at the club, you know, he wants to know. He doesn't want to have a say in everything that's going on, but he wants to know everything that could potentially affect him and the job that he's doing. But equally, he's got an interest in these things. You know, like he's got an interest in politics. Doesn't mean that he thinks that he's right about everything that he says, but he's, you know, he wants to be informed. You know, he's a smart guy. Like that's what one person said to me who's worked closely with him. Exactly that like if he's working with a player, a member of staff, he wants to know everything about them so he can make the best judgments according to both them and him. And you know, I suppose if you're Liverpool's manager, it's not just a sporting role. It's an ambassadorial role as well. I think you know, Roy Hodgson found out very quickly that if it feels like you're not on not just Liverpool Football Club side, but the city of Liverpool side. I don't just mean in terms of sport, you know, with Everton included in that. I mean like in terms of the city of Liverpool and what the city has been through. If you don't show an understanding, you're going to struggle as Liverpool manager, really. You know, I think he's done a lot on that front, you know, to come to understand Liverpool a lot more, because I think when he came as manager, he didn't necessarily know everything about what has happened in Liverpool over the last 30 years, but I think he knows a lot more now, and I think that's the thing about him. He doesn't claim to be the cleverest man in the room, but he can have a conversation with him about most things and on a reasonable level, you know. So it did come on a good day, to be honest, because everybody was a bit gloomy in Liverpool that morning, and fair play to them for getting that deal done quickly without anybody knowing it, because you know, that's the way it should be, I suppose. Even I'm saying that from a journalistic point of view, so I'm probably contradicting myself a bit.
So we do at some point want to touch on the fact that you were the person who brought Klopp and Liverpool together. That's the story, right?
Yeah. Well, again, I don't like. I was a bit reluctant to put this story in the book, but I spoke to, you know, editors about it and just thought, well, it is pretty, you know, quite remarkable period of time, and probably does deserve some coverage, I suppose, because, as I said to you earlier, you know, that summer of 2015, it's quite clear that, you know, Brendan Rodgers was struggling. You know, I know he was allowed to sack his assistant manager and get some new members of staff in, but it's quite clear to me that he was on dodgy ground. And obviously, knowing that Jurgen Klopp was out of work, I just started a very simple phone call, you know, to his agent, who picked up the phone, and just introduced myself and just said, look, you know, what's the sort of state of play, really? And over a number of weeks, you know, we had a lot of conversations just about, you know, it was quite clear to me that he was sort of fact-finding, if you like, you know, sort of trying to learn more about the people at the club and who is important to the club and who should be ignored maybe a little bit. And that became quite clear to me. You know, it was just sort of informal conversations about football, really, and the Premier League. And I know for a fact as well, you know, that there were other journalists who were having similar conversations. I'm absolutely certain of that. You know, that I wasn't the only one picking up the phone. I mean, agents are always readily available, but that doesn't mean, you know, he'll just talk to anyone. But it was quite a strange period, really, because we were having a conversation about something that essentially wasn't happening at the time. But I remember what the sort of the tipping point when things started to accelerate was when I wrote an article in the Independent on Sunday about like sort of where it's all gone wrong with Brendan Rodgers, and at the end of the article, I'd sort of had conversations with people at Liverpool saying, look, it's like it's become quite clear to me, I think, that there's definite interest from Jurgen Klopp, and if you don't speak to him, at least give him, if you're thinking about making a change and you don't speak to him, there's nothing down for you, you know. I was just like, you've got to do it. So more conversations led to the conclusion that basically, you know, there were a few people at Liverpool who were reluctant to ride with Klopp because of some preconceived idea that he was, you know, big character, you know, over, you know, controlling a little bit. But it's quite the opposite, you know, the reality of it. He's worked with a lot of, you know, with the sort of structure that Liverpool wanted to put in place. He'd worked in that structure at Dortmund. It was a very strange sort of view to take. So I just put this, you know, comment at the bottom of the article, you know, saying those thinking the Klopp might get the job, you know, might be left disappointed, sort of thing. And I remember when I wrote the article, I'd written probably about 1,200 words on Brendan Rodgers, and most Liverpool fans picked up on the thing right at the bottom about Jurgen Klopp, and I still get reminded of it now. Like, you were wrong about that. It's like, well, at the time I was pretty confident I was right. You know, that there was opposition to potentially, or a belief that they weren't able to get him. But anyway, the long story short was, over the next couple of weeks, I was calls going backwards and forwards from Liverpool saying, why did you put that? You know, these are different people to the original source. And you know, they sort of stood it up to some extent that Liverpool, you know, didn't know at the time whether they'd have the reach to get him. And I said, look, if you don't pick up the phone, you know, I just said, you've got to pick up the phone. Anyway, in the end, because Rodgers was still in charge, because the agent was like, look, I'm not touting my clients around, you know, it's he realised, you know, it's like, you're a journalist, you know, I could just get absolutely, you know, stung here totally. Yeah. So in the end, I just said, look, both sides, there's the contact details at Liverpool. I found it incredible that somebody at Liverpool didn't have the contact details for Jurgen Klopp. I just said, there's the details, just sort out between yourselves. And then within, I'd say, 7 to 10 days, that's when it started accelerating. That's when Brendan Rodgers got sacked, and that's when people stopped picking up the phone to me. So it was clear to me at that point, you know, that something was going on. Because when people stop picking up the phone, it's always a sign of something. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there were other journalists who had similar experiences around that time. Maybe not exactly the same as mine, but yeah, being you know, it was a very crazy period. I've still got all the emails and texts on my phone as well, so I'll keep them for safekeeping.
Certainly a better story than you being the one who got us Roy Hodgson.
Yeah. Thankfully, wasn't a part of that. That's Christian Perslow, though. Annie and
I'm sure they'd deny it. It was like it was a mistake. It was somebody else.
Yeah.
The other guy. So let's turn to let's talk a little bit about how did you get into writing in the first place?
Well, I live in Crosby, which is about 6 miles north of Liverpool, and I was probably about 15 years old and quite enjoyed. I don't know. I sort of enjoyed reading about football and enjoyed sort of the coverage of football. And I remember I used to go and watch a local team, Marine, who were in the. I'm pointing over there as if you're just.
Okay. Know exactly where it is.
Yeah.
Got it.
And Marine were in the Northern Premier League, and they didn't have they had a reporter, but because the guy who covered Marine was sort of overstretched, shall we say, in terms of his work responsibilities, they were sort of asking around for some help, you know, with weekends coverage of matches and stuff. And because I went to quite a few of the matches, I said, I'm happy to do it. You know, it was unpaid work, but I just thought it's a foot in the door, you know, like sort of, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. And I just remember my dad saying, you've got to give it a go, sort of thing, and see whether you like it. And I mean, I've got to be honest, I didn't particularly enjoy it really at first because I didn't know what I was doing. But nevertheless, when you sort of start seeing your name in print on the back page and stuff, I guess there's a bit of vanity involved, and you think, oh, I quite like this. And so yeah, I just sort of went from there really. For a number of years, I worked unpaid for the local paper, all the way up through university when I went to study in Sheffield, and still covered the team, started doing back page story, news stories, all that sort of thing. But so that went on, and the sort of key break really was when I got to 23, a job came up writing for Liverpool and Everton's matchday programme and magazine, and I went for it because I was essentially I started covering general news in a place called Southport, where my first story I always remember was a UFO sighting, which sort of was a sign of things to come, really, of the level of story available in Southport. So when I got that job with Liverpool, covering Liverpool and Everton, it sort of, it was another sort of in at the football clubs, got to know people, and after a few years doing that, I got a bit bit restless and sort of realised I wanted to get back into newspaper reporting, and I started doing match coverage for the Daily Telegraph, and just sort of matches that no other reporters wanted to do really. So I did that for a few years, and then the Independent came to me and said, look, we'd like you to sort of cover Merseyside for us, because that was where my strength was really, not, I guess, covering matches in Stoke and Derby and Leeds and Hull and places like that. So when that opportunity came, I leapt at that opportunity, and it was great. I loved working for the Indy, but the Athletic came along last summer, and it was just, what they were trying to achieve was something spectacular, I guess, and sort of, not in my lifetime working in the industry had that level of sort of investment been anywhere in journalism. So I just thought I'll regret it if I don't give it a go, and I've really, really enjoyed it since. It's been really good company to work for, and being allowed to sort of do the sort of writing that I enjoy, and with a lot of freedom as well. So yeah, been great to work for so far. Hopefully that'll continue in this new world.
Yeah. Have there been any changes? I know, Tim, did you have a question, sorry, before I launch in?
Oh, no, he kind of answered it. I was going to ask, how old were you when all of this was starting, when you were starting to write for the local club? Sounds like you were in, just before university, or... Yeah.
Well, I was sort of, I'd say that the markers were 15, 23 and 30, if you like. That's when I moved, made big, I suppose, career decisions to go and try and progress myself to some extent. And yeah, I mean, it's every journalist will have different. I mean, it's quite a traditional route that I've taken, I guess. Sort of been quite fortunate that I was able to work for the local paper, the Crosby Herald, which doesn't exist anymore. There was, when I was sort of a teenager, there was still those opportunities to go and work. So to be honest, like that was the most important job that I ever did. I call it a job. I wasn't getting paid, but I was doing the same things there that I do now. Picking up the phone, going to meet people, getting, trying to get the manager to sort of open up to you, players to trust you. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing, just matters to more people now. Like I don't think, I couldn't imagine there's a Marine Delaware supporters group, put it that way.
I think if we did a poll, I'm not sure that more than 10 people would perhaps know where Marine was. But I'd be one of the 10, just to be clear. So actually, you talked about the Athletic. Last weekend, we did an episode, we talked about Istanbul, and the required reading for the where we did the podcast was the piece you and James Pearce did, which I thought was absolutely awesome, the way you'd kind of piece together all of the stories.
Thanks.
So that seemed like a really fun thing to have done, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got to be honest. I enjoy writing about the contemporary stuff. Stuff that's happening now. Really, okay. I mean, and it's been hard, obviously, the last few months because there's no live football. And so you've got to sort of still got pages to fill, but you want to make sure that what you're writing about is still relevant. And I guess, 15 years since Istanbul makes it relevant. It's an event that I think that it is relevant to now. I said this to somebody else the other day, that when you think about like sort of what happens when Liverpool beat Barcelona last season, I don't know whether that happens without Istanbul in many ways, because the same scoreline, isn't it? 3-0. I think as soon as it gets to 3-1, as soon as it became 3-1, I thought Liverpool were going through, largely because of Istanbul, because I just thought the power of the crowd and the belief, it'll just crush Barcelona. You could tell they were struggling already. So it's a very powerful thing, what happens that night. And I don't think people quite realise, in the same way that, people talk about Man United and the late goals they always used to score. It's no surprise that Man United beat Bayern Munich with 2 late goals, because that's what they did a lot in that period, before and after. The impossible is sort of almost what Liverpool specialise in, isn't it? Sort of, you think that they're beaten and then somehow they'll end up going through, or that's what's happened time and time again. And I think Barcelona, the Istanbul, people will remember that forever because of the way it happened. And when harnessed in that way, Liverpool can be unstoppable. And I think that's what Jurgen Klopp really tapped into. And that night, Barcelona was just, for me, like, sort of, as everybody was thinking about, a lot of people were thinking about Istanbul, I think, that night. He didn't quite think it was possible, but when the first goal went in, certainly when the second goal went in, it was just like, that's it now. That's it. They're going to go through. So yeah, I enjoyed writing about it. I did. It was good. Me and James obviously know a lot of the players from that period, so they were quite open to talking about it. And it's just, at the moment, when people, so there's a lot of negativity about it, it's nice to remind that, just when you think you're beaten, just when you think all hope is lost, incredible things can happen. I mean, as much as people try to explain Istanbul, I don't think it's still possible to. I mean, there's a combination of factors, but to score 3 goals in 6 or 7 minutes against one of the great defences, including Paolo Maldini, I just, in a final, I don't think that'll ever happen again, unless Liverpool are involved, maybe. So it was good to sort of go back. And I remember it made me watch the game back for the first time in a long time, and just it still gives you goose pimples just how that happens. You just think, how on earth? That's what makes sport so great, and football particularly, the unscripted drama, it was unbelievable. But that said, I mean, for some strange reason, for me, I actually I take more satisfaction out of the Barcelona win in some ways, because for me, Liverpool are a much better team now. And, as much as like it was a shock that Liverpool came back, I still felt Liverpool really deserved that, to be honest. It wasn't a fluke, Barcelona. They deserved to go through that round. They played well away. They were very unlucky to lose by that scoreline. Yeah. And I think they outclassed them at home and outfought them. It was a comprehensive victory in many ways, and I can take greater satisfaction from that in some ways. I think because I was working on it as well, and had that challenge around it. I mean, to work on an event like that was just a dream come true. Really, it's what you go. That's why you go into football. Why you want to become a football writer, I suppose. To work on the biggest games and to be able to have your impression and send it around the world and people read it. Just great experience, and a day that I'll never forget. Anyway, a night I'll never forget.
So couple of things. One is, if you're listening and you want to read more about Simon's experience the Barcelona game, it's here in LA, which is available in the US, which leads me to, I do want to talk about the She Goes before we finish.
Yeah.
And because you said before we started recording that you in many ways found that kind of more pleasurable to write about a topic that goes beyond, much far beyond just football.
Yeah, I mean, I do like, obviously I love doing the football books, but if I can be totally honest, and this might not be the best thing to say, I mean, I only really started doing football books by accident, really, because to give me a bonus that I never got from work, for a long time. I went into it just at the point where there's a global recession and there's cutbacks. So I had to sort of try and find a way that where I could sort of get a little bit more money to buy a house and this, that, and the other, and that's why I started to do it. Even being totally honest. And I sometimes feel I don't know whether I sometimes feel like I'd like to spend a bit more time on the books, because on the football books, because I sometimes feel like I've rushed them a little bit. Maybe I'm just being too self-critical. I don't know. Possibly fairly so, I think. But
I still recommend reading the book, by the way, if you're
still
listening.
read the book. Still read all the books. I mean,
right.
Very simple format. The sort of each football book is like extended interviews with players from the time with themes threaded through the interviews, and that was the idea. And I'm so happy that I've done them because it's given me a platform of, and I suppose to some extent, a bit more of a reputation that I wouldn't have had otherwise, in terms of writing. So, but yeah, if I'm being totally honest, they were always sort of, they were originally done just to sort of give me a bit more experience as well. If a different, a different way of writing, a different way of interviewing, and build more contacts, all those things added in. But the There She Goes book was done for different reasons. I mean, I obviously I'm from Liverpool and sort of felt that there's a lot of myths about Liverpool as a city, and I wanted to sort of really explain why Liverpool is the way it is and why people feel about it in the way that they do. I mean, so the book covers a period from 1979 to 1993, which is a defining period in my view, where you've got the Thatcher government coming in on a national level, and Liverpool is like, in that period, is never out of the news for good and bad reasons, mainly bad. And there's a certain number of flashpoints that happen in that period. So I'm trying to explain Thatcherism and why that impacted on Liverpool so drastically. I'm trying to explain the toxic riots. I'm trying to explain the heroin epidemic, why that happened. I'm trying to explain Heysel and the impact that had on relations in the city. I'm explaining Hillsborough. I'm explaining militants as well, a militant council, at the time where the whole of the country sort of swung one way politically, Liverpool swung the other way. And then it finishes on the very sort of somber story of James Bulger, who was, a young boy, 2-year-old boy, who was murdered by two 10, 11-year-old children, which sort of was in 1993, and very clear in my mind, very dark days for Liverpool, really, and that contributed towards an impression of Liverpool that I didn't ever feel was fair. I remember watching the news in 1993, and people were talking about Liverpool in this way that I didn't think was accurate, or the Liverpool that I'd seen, the Liverpool that I'd experienced. I mean, I come from a relatively, I would say my sort of upbringing was sort of lower middle class. Like, my parents were working class, but had sort of worked long enough and hard enough to sort of afford a few nice things, holidays and stuff. But the other parts of Liverpool which aren't like that, but I'd experienced those areas through football, really, because a football team that I played for would play all different areas of Liverpool. Play for Sunday League football, schools football. And I remember at the time, I just didn't identify with the way Liverpool was being portrayed. And I think, a lot of people my age, I'm 36 now, sort of feel like that was almost a fallout from the 80s. And a lot of people my age haven't been able to speak about their place in British society or global society, because it sometimes feel like people who lived through the 80s, they're the only ones who can articulate what happens, whereas I feel that we led with the consequences of it. So I'm trying to explain that for maybe a lot of people my age and the younger age groups mainly. I'd say it's more mainly guided towards them. I mean, it's quite interesting sometimes. There are people who are a bit older than me, and they were like, "You're too young to be writing that book." It's that thing in Liverpool. Like, it's like, no, I totally disagree. Actually, I think in many ways I'm probably the right age to be writing the book. So I hope it puts to bed a few myths and and equally explains things that need to explain them with the context that's necessary, because a lot of books have been written about certain events in Liverpool in that period in isolation without connecting all those events, which contribute towards this feeling, and that transcends onto the terraces at Anfield, this sense of resistance that exists at Liverpool. You can't separate. I mean, I know we joked before about politics and football, but unfortunately, because of Liverpool, you can't separate them. It's just impossible to. As much as people might want to, I think that Liverpool politics and football, politics in Liverpool particularly, will always overlap for a large number of reasons. But a lot of those reasons are sort of centered in this period of time that I'm writing about.
So one of the things that I'm sorry, speak as somewhat of an outsider, I think people in the US that I talk to have a hard time understanding is why Liverpool is viewed in such a negative light by a lot of the rest of the country. And it sounds like although the book's not right now available on Amazon, when we get to read it, sounds like you go some way to explaining kind of why some of that hostility towards Liverpool exists.
That's the intention, really. Yeah. I mean, I as I said, I sort of grew up in the 90s and left the city to go and study in the 2000s, and so everywhere you go, you would be met by people would certainly have a preset way of thinking about people from Liverpool and the city itself, the way, you know, the economy of the city and the spirit of the city, and it wasn't always positive, you know, and I found that really draining, actually, if I'm being totally honest. I mean, and I thought, you know, particularly in the last 10 years, I think that there's been a re-energizing of spirit amongst younger Liverpool people who, for a variety of reasons, you know, have sort of started questioning things a lot more. You know, I think there's no coincidence that sort of since the Tory government came back and the city struggled again, that younger people have realised and almost woken up a little bit to the realities and the struggles of the city. And yeah, I mean, I hope that this book just sort of really contextualises the way people feel, really. I mean, it's difficult to be definitive because everybody will have slightly different views, but I've done it the best I can, and hopefully, you know, the book actually, I had quite a small print run in the UK. It was available in the US, and I had quite a lot of people, you know, getting in touch with me from the US, you know, fans as well, sort of, which was encouraging, you know, showing that people are going to paperbacks out, you know, people be able to get a copy of it and hopefully be able to take something from it.
Terrific. So do you have any idea when that might be? I guess it's in the hands of your publisher, right? Did you catch that? I think
just put out a bit there, sorry.
Yeah, I think we're having some problems there with the connection. Yeah, just I don't know if you have any idea when that might be. I guess, you know.
There's been a bit of talk, and possibly it's either going to be autumn time or early next year, I think. So I'll keep you informed as and when that happens. I mean,
be awesome.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, you can get it on Kindle at the moment if you read Kindle, but it's quite interesting that I think 10 years ago everybody was saying, you know, it's got to be on Kindle, but it seems like a lot of people now are buying books again, which is encouraging.
Yeah. Hey, we've kept you for quite a long time and really appreciate you doing this. Just once around, anyone got any final questions? I know there's so much we could have dived into in terms of There She Goes. I could have talked about Jurgen Klopp all day, but let's start. Charlie, do you have a question?
Well, just a comment. Sean is really disappointed at the lack of ridiculous transfer rumors that we're hearing from you, Simon. So if you could just pick it up a little bit, buddy, that'd be great.
Yeah, is anyone from Brazil? Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like a bit of a stock answer, but you know, with everything that's going on, I think, you know, clubs are still uncertain about how their financial outlook will will see him, in a few months' time, which is making it quite difficult for them to make judgments about who to sign and how much to sign them for. I mean, Liverpool wanted, very interested in Timo Werner, very interested in Liverpool, but the reality is that the pandemic is going to have an impact on football finances, particularly a club like Liverpool, which is run in a real economic world. It's not, if it's not making as much money through gate receipts, it is going to have an impact one way or another. There are other clubs, I guess, which might not have Liverpool for a long period of time. They can't just decide to change tact now, and it's been successful for them. So, I mean, I suspect, that once we know, now we know that the football season is going to restart again, which is obviously a good thing. When we have a clear idea of when next season will start, I think it'll become a lot easier for clubs to make judgments on exactly what they want to do. I think Liverpool at the moment are possibly sensing that Red Bull Salzburg, Red Bull Leipzig, for example, with Werner, try and test the water and see whether they'll take less money, for him. Why would you go and spend 70 million on a striker when in a few months' time the economic landscape's changed, where you might be able to get him a bit cheaper? So yeah, I mean, I don't think we'll be seeing much really until clubs get this season finished. Really, it's an unprecedented time, so I can understand fans' frustration and keenness to find out what's going on. But Liverpool quite clearly wanted to beef up the forward line because of the threat of Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane not being around winter time. That they're going to need to find solutions to that. I think looks like Shaqiri will probably go as well. So there's a lot of confidence in Ryan Brewster, young player who very talented player, been doing very well at Swansea. That he can play a role, but nevertheless, I think he's going to need more games to be able to do that. So I could see him playing some more games next season, but I still would expect Liverpool to be at least looking to find solutions. But the thing is, we don't know whether the Africa Cup of Nations is going to happen next year now because of everything that's going on. So all these things are becoming quite difficult to plan, I think.
Yeah, I think Liverpool's fairly well positioned with the couple of loanees. We got 3, I guess, loanees out there who could come back into the fold. Fairly promising academy and youngsters, and
that's it. There's a big Klopp. If he had the choice, he wants to use. I think he gets a great satisfaction from seeing a young player, going into the team and making the position his own. I mean, a year ago, nobody at the club really was talking about Nico Williams, the right back, who I don't think any fan who's seen him play would be concerned if he had to come in for Trent in a league game. He's done so well in every single. I mean, he has a bit of a ropey period of the game against Chelsea, but otherwise he's done very, very well in all the games that he's played. And he didn't even go on the tour of the US last summer. He wasn't invited on. So it just shows you, the club is very prepared to respond to unexpected sort of progression following exposure to first team training and football. Nico Williams now, looks to me to be a very, very good player for Liverpool who could come in at any moment. They've got a good understudy for Trent. So there's a lot of players like that at the academy, who might not make it. I don't know whether it excites people quite as much. It excites me. I want to see Liverpool do that, but the players have got to be ready to play ultimately. They've got to, the standard of this team, this is the other challenge that Liverpool have as well, is that there's only a certain number of players in world football who can improve this Liverpool team at the moment, really.
Right.
You don't want to just be signing players who are going to come in and not challenge, not really push the quality that's already there. So, in each position now, there's only a certain number of players that are able to do that. So let's not forget, it's a great Liverpool team that they've got there at the moment, and good age as well. The older players are all super fit as well. James Milner, to me, I think has had a really good season again. Doesn't show any sign of not being able to continue. The only thing for me that I sometimes wonder, do they sometimes miss a player who can lock that pass in midfield? But then Curtis Jones this season stepped up to the mark in big occasions. To me, looks like a really good footballer. I'd like to see more of him. Could be, very expressive, sort of interesting character as well, which, the more people find out about him, I think that they'll be excited by him as well.
It's always good to have another Scouser on the team too.
Exactly.
I just wanted to jump in and say, yeah, the financial considerations are obvious, and it's fun to talk about transfers, but, we have probably at least 2 to 3 year recovery ahead. I think a lot of people are missing sight of that, the economic devastation that's happened, and that's going to have an impact on everything. But also that we have a damn near perfect team right now. I mean, it's arguably the best team in league history. So, I worry that Mane and Salah will be missing, and that that could help someone close the gap if they have a normal season next year. But like you said, it's difficult to find players that are going to improve this team. So
exactly, I agree. I mean, I think it's easy to forget as well. We don't see what Jurgen Klopp sees every day in training, do we? We don't see sort of the rate of progression of these players. So, obviously they're not doing too much training at the moment, but he is in the best position to make the call on what is needed, I think. I mean, he should have, at best this summer, I think Liverpool would have made one big transfer, and that one big transfer probably would have been Timo Werner. That's not to say that's not going to happen. But he wants to keep the squad together. There's no need to go and sell players. There's absolutely no need. I mean, and there's no need to be constantly signing players as well. I think it's a really exciting time to be following Liverpool, and hopefully the fan base will be sort of understanding of the sort of the situation that everybody finds themselves in. I just think we need to take a bit of a step back and think about what they're doing as a club, and every decision that they make is going to have some sort of consequence at the moment. So we will see. I'm sorry, it's not the most exciting answer, but at the end of the day, there's not many games being played as well, at the moment. So pretty much all recruitment is speak to agents a lot, and there's not much going on, like most clubs really. I mean, 1 or 2 clubs will find a way to sign a player that they need. I'd imagine, Man City are in need of, this will be the challenge, you see, because Man City, I would imagine, will go out and sign some players because they need to. They're losing David Silva. They lost Vincent Kompany last year, haven't replaced him. Sergio Aguero's not getting any younger. They're going to need to find some long-term solutions for those players. And that'll be when, you're saying, look, Manchester City are doing, Liverpool are going to lose, they're going to lose the advantage that they have. And I can understand that argument to some extent. But yeah, let's not forget, Liverpool are a very solid base at the moment. They don't need to make that many changes. I don't think they don't. People can keep saying, well, they need, sooner or later they'll figure out this Jurgen Klopp team. I don't think that's going to happen, to be honest, because the really mad thing about this Liverpool team is that the threat really comes from the fullback positions. The attacking threat is from those, and you cannot stop the 2 fullbacks because you have to basically commit 4 players in your team to stop those 2 players doing what they do, and they're so good. I don't think it's easy to stop this Liverpool team. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I'd have every confidence, particularly with the way the season's sort of looks like it's going to finish. Hopefully, with Liverpool winning the title, in the circumstances that these players are going to want to experience what it's really like to win a title for Liverpool. Like in terms of the madness of the city. Whether we're going to experience another night out in Liverpool for the next 12, 18 months, I'm not sure. But these players won't want to win the title in these circumstances, I'd imagine. And Jurgen Klopp will turn that into a positive, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So just to clarify for Charlie and Tim, we're not going to go in for Koulibaly and Mbappe.
I don't know. If you read between the lines there, Sean, I'm pretty sure you could get Koulibaly out of what side you said.
I mean, he's a great player, isn't he, Koulibaly? I mean, each season, each game against Liverpool, I think he's been one of the best players on the pitch, for Napoli over the last 2 seasons. But I do think, the price that they will be asking for, his age. Who knows? Liverpool there's an argument to say Dejan Lovren's days are numbered at Liverpool, and Liverpool will need another centre-back. But yeah, I'm just not too sure whether. I'd imagine Liverpool. Klopp said not so long ago that they're not looking for the next. They're not looking for Kylian Mbappe. They're looking for the next Kylian Mbappe. So they'll probably be looking for the next Koulibaly as well, I would think.
We've got to leave it there because I sense we're going to move it into dangerous territory if we're going to start talking about Dejan Lovren.
I'm staying on mute.
Good.
Yeah.
So I apologize. We ran way over in terms of your time, Simon, but this was fascinating. And despite the fact that you downplayed your answer not being very exciting, I think actually it was really thoughtful. And I didn't see the gap for Koulibaly in there anywhere. So that's good by me.
Thanks.
So thanks for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording now.